Conservatives opposed to Trump say they need $100 million to wage an independent campaign in a few key states. But Elaine, there's no candidate, number one, and there's no sign GOP donors who've already given $18 million to anti-Trump super PACs have any stomach for an even costlier endeavor.
Okay, so you just kind of answered this first question here, Major. I'm going to ask it anyway. John Kasich is a clear no. Mark Cuban, whose name had also been floated, says he doesn't think that he could pull off a third-party bid at this point. So how realistic, though, regardless, would an independent run be against Donald Trump?
It is the longest of long shots, and that's not even being charitable to long shots. I mean, it is beyond the scope of any credible, real conversation. North Carolina, it comes up next as far as ballot access deadlines, June 9th. Very high threshold of signatures there. Many other states follow in sequence. Let me just give you a historical perspective to put this in some kind of context. Ross Perot is the most successful third-party candidate in modern presidential history. He won 19.7% of the vote in 1992 against sitting President George H.W. Bush, Democratic challenger Bill Clinton. By the first week in July, Ross Perot had already qualified for 18 state ballots and was well on his way to being qualified in California and the state of Washington. He was well ahead of the process, using only volunteers who did this at a grassroots level to urge Perot to run. The point I'm trying to make is not only was Perot way ahead of it, but he had an effective, organized group of volunteers in all 50 states doing this work for him. For these small few conservative critics of Trump who are trying to figure out some way to mount a third-party challenge, they have no grassroots support, they have no donors, and they have no candidate. Okay, then, what do you have other than a sort of fanciful, kind of mystical, semi-unicorn notion that this might be possible? You don't have much else.
So you're saying it's not realistic. Okay. All right. Got it. Major, let me turn to this. Donald Trump is hitting back at the New York Times over this piece on his relationship with women. Trump's former companion, Roanne Brewer Lane, who was featured in the piece, is also pushing back. Here's what she said.
They did take quotes from what I said, and they put a negative connotation. They spun it to where it appeared negative. I did not have a negative experience with Donald Trump, and I don't appreciate them making it look like that I was saying that it was a negative experience.
So, Major, what do you make of this story and the potential effect it may or may not have on voters out there?
Journalistically, the story is out there in a sense that here's a lot of information about Donald Trump. There are no hard and fast conclusions about what Trump absolutely is or absolutely isn't. The reporters on our very own network this morning, on CBS this morning, said the story about Donald Trump is complicated. There was never an allegation in that story of creating a hostile workplace environment, sexual harassment, or any of the kinds of things that have been alleged about presidential candidates before and viewed to be disqualifying. There were other sentiments expressed that he might have at times been crude, maybe a little too suggestive, maybe demeaning. But there is a standard in American workplace law about hostile work environments, sexual harassment. Those things can and are dealt with in all sorts of contexts. Never were those kind of really red flag issues raised in the context of this story. So it was more biography. Here's interesting information, possibly to voters, about who Trump is and how Trump interacts and has interacted over the decades with women. But as the reporters themselves pointed out, one of the things that's complicated about this is also Donald Trump hired women, promoted them to very successful and high-profile positions much earlier than many other rival companies run by men at the same time did in the real estate industry in New York. So in the main, it is biography information. It is not necessarily, hey, this is something serious and terrible or potentially terrible about Donald Trump, and we've uncovered it. It's more in the classification of biography. But Trump still knows that he has historically high unfavorables among women, and anything that's in this realm, he's got to fight back against. And he's doing his level best to try to do that, to characterize it as a hit piece, when the New York Times and the reporters who put it together don't characterize it that way at all. They put it much more in the category of classical biography. By that, they mean here's lots of information, lots of interviews, voters of America, make of it what you will.
Okay, so on this point of fighting back, Brian Stelter, the media reporter for CNN, says that Donald Trump called CNN's morning show control room to alert them that the Fox interview with Roe Brewer Lane had happened. What do you make of that potential development?
That Donald Trump is very protective of Donald Trump's image and will do things that no other presidential candidate has done to protect his image. Now, that's not breaking news. That's not even close to breaking news. Everyone has sort of figured that out by now. Donald Trump will do things no one in the presidential derby has ever done before. But even this, by that Trumpian standard, is unusual. And Trump wants to make sure that those who are in the sort of 24-hour cable news cycle and who can drive a daily narrative are apprised of other things that he thinks will help them. And he will be his own best advocate. I mean, one of the things that is interesting about dealing with the Trump campaign is that there is not, forgive me, grammatical error. All of my high school English teachers are shuddering in the audience right now. There is not a team of surrogates who stand at the ready on the Trump ramparts to protect him. Trump does that. They take their clues and cues from Trump, but Trump is his own chief spokesman. He's the candidate and spokesman, often in rapid-fire succession. And he drives all of this narrative. And he doesn't rely, and probably in large measure, if he can get away with it, will not rely on what most presidential campaigns build around them, which is an entire apparatus of spokespeople, PR flacks, surrogates, hangers-on, and other amplifiers of the pre-digested and pre-approved message. No, no, no. Trump is an originalist in this sense, a complete originalist, utterly unique. He drives the message in his own voice, his own verbs, his own adjectives and nouns, his own Twitter feed, and that's how these things are dealt with. And if it means calling a cable news control room and saying, hey, did you see that thing on arrival? You might want to look into it. Trump will do it.
All right, always a fascinating campaign to watch. All right, Major Garrett, thank you so much.
You got it.